every time we make a decision, that decision has consequences. Every time we take an action, that action has consequences. And we need to be very aware of that. Also, and this has really come home to us, hasn't it, in the last few weeks, you don't know what tomorrow holds, good or bad. You know, I think back a year ago, who in Fort Gibson, Oklahoma, would have anticipated that in a matter of a few weeks, this valley would pretty well be underwater, that we would be facing an incredibly devastating flood that would have huge consequences, socially, economically, emotionally, in every way, on this whole river valley, and in particular, on this community. Couldn't anticipate that. We gathered back at Christmas and celebrated the birth of our Lord, and we're looking forward to 2020. Who among us knew that this pandemic was brewing and cooking in China at the time, and that it was going to sweep this direction, and that Western Europe and the United States were going to be disrupted in a way that we couldn't even possibly comprehend or imagine? The fact of the matter is that we don't know many of the consequences of the decisions we make, that we don't know what tomorrow may hold. And I really do think this explains the conservatism of many elderly folks, because they've had to face unforeseen circumstances. They've had to face uncertain futures. And as you get older, you stop and think more about, what could this bring about? Or do I really know what's going to happen tomorrow? And I think all of this is simply a reflection of the uncertainty of life and of the fact that life is indeed filled with storms. But God has given us a real anchor to grasp and hold on to when the storms of life come our way. I was fascinated as I was thinking about anchors, and so I did a little research. Because you know, when a storm comes, one of the most important things a ship can do is go to a safe harbor and anchor. And so I looked at our aircraft carrier, the Enterprise. I was curious, how much does an anchor weigh on the Enterprise? 15 tons, folks. 30,000 pounds. Depending upon the chain, they said that chain may weigh 500 pounds per link. In one case, another case, 150 pounds per link in that chain. But when a storm comes and that huge ship anchors, they want it to stay, because if it stays, it can weather the storm. And so it is in your life and mine. We need to have an anchor for our souls. And one of those anchors, beautifully, is Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. I want us to take a moment to kind of take this passage apart and think about the beauty of what Paul reassures us of here. First of all, notice he says, and we know. Now, it's interesting that there's a couple of different ways in which you can know, a couple of different ways in which you can talk about knowledge. I can know that head knowledge that 2 + 2 is 4. I can also know experientially that I am loved, and that's a completely different thing, but it's an equally solid kind of a knowledge. And it's fascinating, we don't have time to go into it, but the Greeks separated that out. They made a difference between kind of head knowledge and heart knowledge. But here Paul is saying, I want you to know that you can know that all things work together for good. Now, how can we know that? Well, for one thing, we can know that from biblical examples. For instance, Joseph in Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20, as he's reflecting back, it's right at the end of the book of Genesis, he's reflecting back on everything that's happened to him. And he tells his brothers, listen, you don't need to be afraid of me, because now I understand, I know that what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And we talked before about the fact that, this young man has his family betray him. They would have killed him if they could have, but they sell him into slavery. He will spend 13 years as a slave, in prison, falsely accused of a horrible crime. But as he looks back, he goes, you know what? If it hadn't have been those 13 years and that sequence of events, I never would have been able to stand before Pharaoh. Pharaoh is not going to talk to a Hebrew shepherd. He's not going to do it. It wouldn't happen. The only way it could happen was for God to work it providentially to where Joseph would find himself in a situation to have the credibility for Pharaoh to actually call him into his presence and speak to him. And that's exactly what God brings about. And Joseph, looking back, goes, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, again, that you guys intended evil. I know you did. But God took evil and made it good. That in all things, God works together for the good of those who love him. I think about in the early church, in the book of Acts chapter 8, verse 4, right after the stoning of Stephen, it says that Saul begins to persecute the early church, and the church scatters out of Jerusalem. Bad thing, right? No, good thing. Because as the brethren scatter and they go through Judea and Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the earth, what's happening? The gospel is spreading like it's never spread before. And the church is going to grow like it's never grown before. God is going to take something awful and he's going to turn it into something good. He's going to use it to the furtherance of his kingdom. Think about the fact that we can know that all things work together for good from the blessing of time. Has time ever changed your perspective on something? I'm sure it has, over and over again. It has certainly in my life. I remember when I was a kid and Mom and Dad decided to move to the farm. They looked at a place near Howard, Kansas, and I loved that place. It had a big old 2-story farmhouse, had a creek running out beside the place, had a big pasture, had woodlands, and I could just picture myself fishing and hunting and having a great time. And I was just like, this is a place I want us to move to. And that's not where we moved. We moved to a little place near Benton, Kansas, and that's what Mom and Dad bought, and that's where I grew up. And I look back now and I go, thank God they moved to Benton. Because if they hadn't moved there, I never would have been able to get involved in the little church at Andover like I did. I would never have met my wife of almost 50 years now, and I can't imagine life without her. As I look back as an 11-year-old thinking about, oh boy, I hope we moved to Howard, Kansas, I'm sure glad we didn't. Perspective changes over time as you look back at events that occur in your life and you begin to see, ooh, God's working in that in a beautiful way. In the same way, I think we can know that God works all things for good from the eye of faith. Listen, if it's always been true, why would it ever cease to be true? If God is always caring for you, always watching out for you, if God has always provided for you, why do we get up one day and go, well, I don't know, maybe today he's not going to? Yeah, he has all these years. Up to this point, always, he's been there for me. Brethren, he's not going to change. Lo, I am with you always. And we can trust that, and we can know that. We know that in all things. Now notice what he says here. This is pretty. All's a big little word, isn't it? Because all covers everything. All covers good and bad. All covers righteous and evil. Well, let's just think about this for a moment in the context of, remember what God did with the cross? I want you to think about that for a minute. If I met a young lady and she had a necklace on, and a pendant hung off that necklace. And that pendant was this big old gold noose. I might well ask her, why in the world do you have a noose hanging off your necklace? I don't get it. And if her response was, well, the noose is a beautiful thing. The one who died for my sins was hanged by the neck till dead. And this noose symbolizes his sacrifice to me. And this ugly thing has been made beautiful because of what he did. Now, honestly, would you go, what? Make any sense? A noose, really? Do you understand the impact of the cross in the first century? Which I think would be even greater than that of a noose. For someone to go, you celebrate what? You consider what? A cross? Because the cross was an ugly thing, brothers and sisters. The cross was a vile thing. The cross was where you took the worst of the worst and you punished them in the worst kind of way and you tortured them till they died. Why would anybody ever celebrate a cross? And yet today, think how many hundreds of millions of crosses have been made and worn and are celebrating and reflecting upon what Jesus did for us. God took something ugly and he made it beautiful. That's how he works. Isaiah says in Isaiah 59 verse 1, surely the arm of the Lord is not too short to save, nor his ear too dull to hear. So we can know that no matter what, in all things, good, bad, happy, sad, God works for the good of those who love him. And I believe he does this in several ways. One, by deepening our relationship with him and with others. This is not a good time. This is a bad time. I mean, there's a lot of discussion now about depression and people dealing with struggling with all kinds of negative emotions. But it's also a time, I think, where God is reminding us of just how important our relationship with each other is. You know, I've had grandparents talking to me about the fact that they miss the grandkids. They miss getting to hold their grandkids and see their grandkids and be around their grandkids. They miss the fellowship that we enjoy here in the assembly. They miss the hugs and the holds and so on. They miss that. And I think that the more that we find ourselves cut off from each other, perhaps distance makes the heart grow fonder the more we begin to once more appreciate just how much we need each other. God works for our strengthening, and he does it in a number of ways. He does it through trials. James chapter 1 verse 3, count it all joy when you encounter manifold trials. And it's absolutely true that whether it was a flood last year or it's this pandemic that's going on right now, ultimately will grow spiritually because of it. I've already watched people drawing closer to the Lord, closer to each other because of exactly what's going on right now. God will take this bad and he will use it for good. He'll also work through discipline. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. We don't enjoy going through hard times. We don't enjoy facing difficulties, but the fact of the matter is that God takes those times and he works through them and uses them to allow us to grow and develop spiritual muscles in ways that otherwise it would never happen. So all things work together for good to those who love him, to those who have been called according to his purpose. And if you notice, I underlined his, because I think sometimes we need to ask ourselves the question, is his purpose always our purpose? I think sometimes we confuse our purpose with his purpose, and we think, well, if he's going to get something done, he needs to do it our way. That's not the criteria that we need to be looking at and we need to be following. What we need to be asking is, are we accomplishing his purpose? Because that's what we've been called to do. Called to work according to his purpose. You know, I think about Jesus' words in the garden in Matthew 26, verse 39. Yet, not as I will, but as you will. That's what needs to be at the base of all of our hearts and everything, and especially in evaluation of whatever comes our direction, is Father, I know what I want, but I want to want what you want. I want to desire what you desire. That's what I want to seek. That's what I want to know, because we've been called according to his purpose. And that's going to involve the furtherance of his kingdom. Matthew 6, verse 33. Remember what Jesus says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. If we are seeking his purpose, if we're seeking his righteousness, he says, no matter what happens, no matter what comes, I am going to take care of you. I am going to provide for you. Last year I lost a dear friend, a man I've known for over 40 years. We've spent many times together at seminars and different things, and he preached that whole time. Now, Jim's life had its ups and its downs. He faced illness. There were times when he didn't have a job preaching. There were times when, for instance, he worked for a while as he and his wife as house parents in a children's home. And there were times when they were almost destitute. There was a good friend of his who allowed him to stay in a house for a while because he was literally homeless, didn't have a place to live. There were several times when we and other friends would send him money so they could buy groceries and get by. But you know, through his life, Jim never complained. And he never questioned that God was blessing him and God was with him. He was always optimistic, always positive, because he was always seeking to do the will of the Lord. I mean, to him, that's what mattered, was glorifying God and furthering his kingdom in whatever way he could do it. And he had a tremendous impact on my life and on my thinking, because I saw a man that God took care of. God always took care of him because he put the kingdom first. Will your anchor hold in the storms of life? When the clouds unfold their wings of strife, when the strong tides lift and the cables strain, will your anchor drift or firm remain? We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll, fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love. Your anchor's going to hold. My anchor's going to hold. If it's rooted in, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. May God richly bless you this week.